Stop asking people to treat you right. They know. They know the things they do. They don't need long texts explaining their behavior. Trust me, they know. Try a different method. Remove yourself from their life. Deny that access and no peace. By Toke Makinwa. Hey everybody, welcome to Tuesday's episode of Toya Talks. My name is of course Toya Washington. If you are listening to this podcast for the first time, welcome. Please acquaint yourself with the previous podcast episodes, and of course my reoccurring listeners, my devout podcast listeners, you are of course always welcome, and I thank you for always showing your support each and every week. Woo, do you know what? That quote that I read by Toke Makinwa, it's actually a lot. I don't even think that I have sat there to unpack the reality that sometimes you go into this great detail of explaining people's behavior to them and why maybe you're offended. But the reality is people do actually know what they do. I think there's only like a minute amount of people that are just completely oblivious to their own behavior. But I really do believe, as social animals that we are, that people are aware of the behavior they do. And sometimes the only way to address certain behaviors is just to remove yourself, to seek peace, and that is a form of self-care. And I think so many people frown on the idea of ghosting people or not saying anything, but I think that as adults we need to trust that people understand their own behavior and what they do, and if they know that there's something wrong, the first thing that you would automatically do is do some self-reflection and think about, have I done something, and actually hold yourself accountable. I think we spend too long trying to force people to be accountable for the behavior that they're well aware of, and they're just choosing to live in blind ignorance. And there comes a point where you have to just pick yourself first, and there's no shame in being selfless in understanding that actually I pick myself, and in picking myself, that is a form of self-care. I digress. This is a dilemma episode. I've received so many dilemmas, and literally, I say I only, but it's a lot of work, but it's work that I love doing. I post new episodes once a week, and literally I'm trying to kind of catch up with all the dilemmas. So hopefully we're going to do 3 dilemmas today. If I could do 4, I will try. And we're going to just take the normal format that we do on dilemmas, where I would read the dilemma out, I would give my honest and frank opinion, and give some advice that I hope will be constructive and provide a solution to a lot of the dilemmas we have been receiving here. And if you want to send a dilemma, a work-related dilemma, or something that maybe isn't necessarily work-related, but as a Black woman you are finding a particular area of your life a struggle, then of course email myself, Toya. The email address is hello@toyatalks.com. That's hello@toyatalks.com. So let's get down to the dilemmas. And we're going to call her Sammy. Hi Toya, I came across your podcast and I find it really insightful. You are very wise and are like the sister or relative I wish I had in my life to learn from. Cringe, sorry. I have a little dilemma that I'd like your insight on if possible. I've been offered a 0-hour contract that would be carried out on weekends. I work full-time and I'm contemplating whether to inform my current employer or company that I have a second job, stressing that it wouldn't be affecting hours required from them. I'm not sure if they can even tell me, no, you can't take this other job. But I don't know if telling them is the right thing to do. I understand my tax bracket will change, which they'll see, but it can't lead to any serious consequences, can it? Does HR need to know what I choose to do outside of work hours? Do you see a way it might negatively impact me if I don't inform them about this 0-hour contract I'll be doing on Saturdays? How would you approach the situation I'm in? Thanks in advance, Sammy. And I then went back to her, whenever someone sends a dilemma, I always go back just to acknowledge it so they know that it's been received. However, she came back and she said, I'm going to an induction for a 0-hour job and was wondering if I could raise anything you thought that might be important or insightful. And then she came back again and said, my full-time employer is not aware of the other side job, but my new employer is. When I was called by the branch manager, I informed them I had a full-time position. It wasn't my intention to disclose this, but they had asked a direct question, which inevitably led me to state it. They didn't seem to have an issue with that, and it was fine with the hours I could offer her. She casually informed me that there were a few people under their current employment working full-time too, hoping I didn't implicate things before even starting. Kind regards, Sammy. So, first of all, I think whenever you have a question in relation to your job or taking up a part-time job, so basically what she's saying to me is Monday to Friday she has a perm role, and then on Saturdays she has taken up a 0-hour contract with another company. Now, the first thing I will always say is you need to look at your contract for your full-time job. So in your full-time job, you have an employment contract, and there should be like a non-compete clause or an exclusivity clause. And in those clauses, it would actually state quite explicitly that one, you may not be able to work for another competitor, possibly in the same industry, or you'd have to notify them that you'd be like, they will give you clear guidance in that clause about what you can and can't do. Secondly, I will always say to you, if you're unsure about whether you can take a second job, just have a look in your contract. Don't be too quick to tell your full-time employer that you're doing a weekend job somewhere else unless they explicitly ask you. Now, I don't know if, Sammy, you have listened to the podcast previous episodes where I talk about workplace myths. I think that's actually in the first season. And I dispel a lot of myths that people have about the workplace, because the tax bracket thing is another myth. I think people credit human resources with too much credit. And I know that sounds bad, but just follow me here. Human resources are resourcing the entire organization. If someone's tax bracket changes, it's usually payroll that notice it. And even though payroll sits in human resources, payroll is a completely different team. In fact, all the organizations I've worked for before, payroll sits with finance. And if your tax bracket changes, they don't go to, say, your HR business partner and say, hey, this person's tax bracket's changed. They don't. They just literally affect the change. It's really more of a paper pushing exercise rather than a notification to tell someone, oh, by the way, you need to. It doesn't really work like that. And I think these are some of the myths that haven't been dispelled because we just assume that human resources are a bit more on the ball when it comes to resourcing the staff members, and it's really not as kind of rigorous as that. If your contract is silent, if your employment contract is silent about taking another job or a part-time job on the weekend, then of course you can do it. And I would say in this situation where the 0-hour contract role, which is just Saturdays, asked her, do you have a perm role? And she said yes. I think in that situation, of course you'll be honest because they've asked you a direct question. And again, I don't think you've implicated, I think you're just overthinking it. I think the most important thing is that you're aware from a financial perspective, and it seems that you are, that your tax bracket is going to change. And that's basically it. With your Monday to Friday role, I don't think you should say anything to them, simply because I feel like with white people, when you give them too much information, they feel like they have to do something with it. And I definitely feel like, I say with white people because in a lot of the roles I've worked in, the decision makers are white people, and that's a fact. And I just think that with your Monday to Friday role, don't give them more information than they need or ask you for. I would say go and look at your employment contract and see what it says about maybe having a second job or working exclusively for the company. If there's a non-compete clause, what does that non-compete clause say? But then if it says, oh, you can't work for a competitor, but you know you're zero. So if you work Monday to Friday for a sports company and then it has a non-compete clause, but you know that your Saturday job is working in Ann Summers, clearly you can do that because Ann Summers is not a competitor of this sports company you're working for because they're completely different industries. So I think that you've handled it really, really well, and I think you need to give yourself a lot more credit for the fact that you've handled it really well. Again, I would say this to anybody who's listening to the podcast. If you have a question about your job, your first point of call is your employment contract. It governs the relationship between the employer and the employee. So hopefully, Sammy, that really helps. And good luck with your Monday to Friday role, your full time role, and good luck with your 0 hour contract role that you got on Saturday. And I really hope you do really well. And more importantly, don't overthink it. And if there is anything else that comes up out of it, then of course just email in to hello@toytalks.com, and of course I will advise you. Okay, that wasn't too bad. That was quite straightforward. Let's go on to the second dilemma. Changing careers in your 30s. Good evening, Toya. I hope you're doing well. Firstly, I'd like to thank you for all you're doing for Black women. You literally have been pivotal in helping me aspire for more in my career and life in general. I cannot even thank you enough. I'd really like to get your opinion and thoughts on changing your career in your 30s. I've been working as an IT project manager for most of my career, and it's been financially rewarding for the most part. However, over the past year, and especially in quarantine, I've fallen out of love with the role and my career. I've tried moving organisations and even the type of projects I work on, but I still feel bored and unmotivated by the work I do. I've identified what career I'd like to move into, but I'd like to know from you whether you think it's too late, being in my being in my 30s and all, and what advice you have for anyone wanting to change career later in life. Thank you so much. Anonymous. Wow. Well, firstly, I want to put this out there and say, we definitely have to give ourselves credit for having a career, just having a career. There are so many people who don't have a career and are still trying to figure it out, and therefore haven't had the opportunity to kind of just focus on one thing. Instead, they're still trying to just figure it out, and it has meant that they've worked in really horrendous places, or they just don't know what the steps they need to do to be able to develop any career. So I definitely think it's important that we celebrate the fact that this young woman has a career, and now that she's fallen out of love with it, it doesn't mean or isn't a reflection of her. I think that this is a reflection of what I've spoken about before in previous episodes about often reaching a crossroads. And I definitely believe, like, people call it midlife crisis. I don't refer to it as that. I refer to it as a crossroads, because I think in your life you go through many crossroads, and I think this is one of your mid-30s crossroads, whereby you just have literally just fallen out of love with something that you were once in love with. You know, when I first studied law, obviously I was going to be a lawyer, right? That's what I told everyone, and that's what my parents had told me. I was going to be a lawyer. And there was quite a few significant things that had happened, but I was 6 months into my training contract, and I literally just fell out of love with law. I fell out of love with the idea of becoming a lawyer, and I became very disillusioned with what the British system believes is justice. And I kind of walked away, and I was on a trajectory whereby I had I was literally 6 months into a training contract. I'd been exempt from 6 months of it, so I only had a year and a half to do. And that was my crossroads. Perspective of how old I was, I think what was more important is, if you're going to commit yourself to a career, you need to commit yourself to something you love doing, because if you love doing it, it isn't a chore. You will go over and beyond. You will be the master of what your progress should look like. You will be invested in your development. And the most significant thing that you've said here is that you've fallen out of love with what you do. And I think people place heavy weight on age in terms of, okay, so I'm in my mid-30s. Oh, can I really be doing this because I'm supposed to be doing this? Because society dictates at certain periods of your life you should be doing a certain thing, and if you're not doing it, then the society views it as some type of failure. And I hate that word failure. I really dislike it. Whether you are in your 30s, whether you're in your 40s, you can change career at any time of your life. My father was a chartered accountant for most of my life. literally for most of my life. So he'd been doing it for about, by the time I was, I think about 18, 19, he'd been doing it for like almost just over 15 years. And he then decided that he wanted to study law. At this point, my dad was like 53 or something, 52. And literally, as I was finishing uni, my father was doing the fast track course. I can't remember what they call it, but it's to be a lawyer. And my dad actually qualified as a lawyer, and he done his training contract and was made partner at the law firm he was working at. And I watched my father balance having a full-time job as a chartered accountant, running a family, looking after and attending parents' evenings, looking after me and my brothers, looking after my mum, going to church every Sunday, and being a family man. And I watched him do his exams, I watched him revise, and still having to balance and juggle everything. And I think what that taught me was there is never an age that is too late to learn. There is never an age that is too late to fulfill your dream. And what I later found out was that my dad always wanted to be a lawyer, but he was guided more towards the finance and being a chartered accountant because he was just naturally good with finances and accounting. And no one actually asked him, what would you want to do? And my father was actually a really, really fantastic lawyer. He specialized in immigration law specifically, but he was, one of his other specialities was housing and family law, and he did it really, really well. And I learned from my father that I can do anything I set my mind to, and it doesn't matter what age. Don't allow age to limit you from pursuing what makes you happy, and don't allow society to dictate what happiness should look like or what age that you should be to be able to achieve something. So to answer your question, I would say that being in your 30s is by the by. Having a career change effectively is finding out something else that you're really, really good at. And it's at such an exciting time because you've had a career as an IT project manager. And I think the way to look at it is the IT project management can be your fallback. And even though you're not in love with it anymore, you may find that pursuing another career can help you fall back in love with IT project management or another form of project management. But this is an exciting time for you to find out what it is that you want to do. And you've said that you've identified what career you'd like to move into. And I would say go forth and conquer, go ahead and do it. I think as Black women especially, we, number one, don't cheer for ourselves enough. But number two, we're so hard on ourselves. Society is giving us so many negatives that in fact we then begin not only to self-doubt, but it encourages us to self-doubt because society is telling us we're not good enough. But I will always say, if you are passionate about something, whether you are in your 20s, your 30s, 40s, and then you fall out of love and actually you're really good at something else, go ahead. If anybody knows like my career and where I've come from, a lot of you will know that even before the Big Brother reality show, I was an African TV presenter in Africa. I was signed to one of the biggest broadcasters in Nigeria, and that's what I was doing. I finished, I walked away from my training contract, and I just told my dad, you know what, I want to be an African TV presenter. That's what I want to do. And I got scouted. One day I'll tell you guys the story. And then I went to Nigeria, got signed to this broadcaster, and literally I was traveling everywhere. South Africa, I was in different parts of Nigeria. You name it, I was doing it. And then in the UK, I was being booked for Glam Africa Awards. I was doing the Afro Hair and Beauty show. Like, I did a lot of stuff. And then when my father died, I just fell out of love with it. I was 29 when my father died. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'd come off a reality show. I was like, it's not me. It doesn't make me happy anymore. And granted, there was a lot of emotion involved. I'd lost my father and I literally just wanted to hibernate. But then I had, my career to fall back on. And then I decided just to go back into what I knew and what I actually loved. And then look at me now, like I have my own business and I'm a contract consultant and I absolutely love what I do. But when I look back at kind of doing the whole TV presenting and traveling and doing what made me happy at the time, I definitely feel very fulfilled and very well rounded because I was able to kind of do that and do it as a passion and understand that when I fell out of love with it, I could explore other things. So yeah, I just again would encourage you to explore what makes you happy. Put aside your age because that's irrelevant. In fact, what your age tells me is that you have had the opportunity to earn the money doing something you loved, and now you want to earn more money doing something else that you love. And it could be completely different from project management, but you have one life to live because once it's gone, it's gone. So hopefully, my lovely, that really helps you out. Let me know how you get on, and I wish you all the best. Guys, like we're getting through these dilemmas. I think we're doing really well. So let's move on to the third dilemma. So the next dilemma came through on my Instagram DMs. It looks like a bit of a long one, so I'm going to have to try and get through this as quickly as possible. Hi Toya, I just wanted to say a huge thank you. I started my job as an intern fresh out of uni, but did so well while they extended me and later offered me a job, and this is all thanks to your wise guidance. Needless to say, it's been a year and a bit now, and I'm the subject matter expert of my area. I define the role I do, and without me, things cannot function. You are a light that has guided me in this chaotic work environment, and I thank you. I have a little bit of an issue right now, though. The manager who hired me has been moving a little weird. I can't lie, I lowered my guard a lot because she's a black woman and initially seemed so supportive and welcoming. However, she's hired more people for the team under the guise that they are here to support me. However, I feel like instead of progressing, I'm regressing. A lot of the responsibilities I had are now being taken away and replaced with things I don't care for, like training people. I like the variety of tasks I did daily, but now it's being reduced and I'm losing interest. Also, a lot of the responsibility I had, including delegating work and playing a big role in strategic planning, has been taken away. My ideas are taken, but I'm not invited into the conversation like I previously was. I'm not sure what to do. I'm so sorry that this is long. I'm realising that I left out an important part of the dilemma because I'm trying to be concise, but I think it's needed. One of the new people who was joined our team was brought in to be our line manager, another black woman. Let's call her Mary. She sits between the manager who hired me and is adamant that she will act as a channel of communication between the team and the manager. This is problematic because she doesn't know the job as well as the manager and I do, and it creates a delay as well as wrong information being passed to the manager. Initially, I felt some type of way about having this role. It's because I felt like I was already doing her job before she came. But I took a step back and realised that I was letting my emotions get in the way. She was hired for a job, so I'll step back and let her do it. However, I've noticed she's been trying to minimise how much I do in the team. We've just finished off one of the projects we were doing, and Mary sent a breakdown of achievements to the manager. In the breakdown, she produced a list of activities and chose to put names, who did what on only some activities, and leave most of the ones done by me unnamed. She gave me a very small shout out, even though I did 80% of the work. This is annoying because to my face, she sings my praises, but to everyone else, she has barely anything to say. Sorry again for how long this is, and thank you for reading. Anonymous. Well, firstly, I have previously done an episode, and it's in season 2, about black gatekeepers. And I've also spoken on previous episodes about allies and not assuming that just because there is a fellow black woman working with you, that she's automatically an ally. Because I've worked for black women before. There's an episode called Monique Pennycook. I've worked for black women, or not for with Monique Pennycook. I wasn't working for her, but worked with her. And just because you are consciously black doesn't mean the person that you're sitting next to knows they're consciously black. Some people are wearing many different masks in the office. And I understand initially with your manager, you saw her as an ally. You did, because you identified that she was a fellow black woman and you let your guard down a little bit. But this is the problem. You can't let your guard down at work. Like, I don't know how many times I have to keep on reiterating it. You cannot let your guard down at work. Even if you get on with everyone and it feels like a family and everybody's so nice and they're talking to you, they're getting your lunch every day. In fact, they're leaving you sweets at your desk. You can't let your guard down, because what has brought you together is the job. Without the job, you wouldn't know these people. You wouldn't interact with these people. You wouldn't have to interact. You need to start seeing your jobs as a bit more transactional, in understanding that you're going there to deliver. Because if you don't do your job, believe me, all that family unit you've been trying to create in the workplace would count for nothing. And I think people need to just get a bit of perspective here. They will still make you redundant. Listen, I heard a story this weekend about a team that's such a family and everyone gets on so well, but they still had to make people redundant. And that just goes to say that it's still work. It's still a professional environment at the end of the day. And what binds you together is that you're both employed by the same employer. They're paying your salaries. So I think that I understand that with the manager, you had a good relationship. But as I was reading this, I already knew what was going to happen. And unfortunately, darling, you're now fighting for your job. That's what you're doing. You're fighting for your job without even realizing that there's a fight happening. Now, let's take this section by section. You had basically management responsibility of this team, and then your job changed a little bit. And as your job was changing, you noticed that the manager that was hiring you, the black woman that you had such a good relationship with, started to change a little bit. Yeah, because you know what it is? Managers like you as long as you make them look good. As soon as you start highlighting their flaws in their management, or as soon as you are being recognized maybe by other members of staff about how well you do, it also highlights the flaws in the person that you report into. It's such a fine line. It's so difficult, honestly. It's a fine line between delivering and making your manager look good, and then you just delivering without intending to highlight the flaws in a manager, but you just do. But this is why you have to really study the people you work with, your colleagues, your managers. What are their Achilles heel? Where is your leverage? What are you having to avoid? What are the hot coals that you might have to walk across to get certain things? How are you able to kind of manipulate your position to achieve your objectives? At the end of year review, when you're looking at your objectives, how have you managed to achieve them by using and acquiring the knowledge in the team and being able to leverage that, so that when you then go and have conversations about promotions and stuff, you're able to actually show that you've over-delivered. I think that was your first error. And I think you recognized that, right? Now, when this manager hired somebody that basically sits in between you and her, that person was hired. Maybe there was a role for them. But the fact that this person has now taken it a step further, and there was a project. And you see, this is how I know that this person that they've hired is quite divisive. Whenever I've worked in a team and we're talking about achievements, we talk about team achievements. When you start writing people's names next to the achievements, what you're doing is you're highlighting to management where the success is apportioned, and that's dangerous. Because somebody will not be apportioned the same amount of achievements and successes in a project as others. And then that person automatically looks like the weakest link. And that is what's being... You're basically... I wouldn't say you're being managed out, but your flaws are being highlighted on Front Street. That's basically what's happening. And you now have a couple of choices here. Your first choice is either you sit down and have a conversation with your manager, but given that your relationship isn't the same as it used to be, given that she's gone behind your back effectively, and hired this person, I will go on record to probably say, talking to her, that ship has kind of sailed. You are going to have to kind of meet this girl that was hired where she is, and you're going to have to start mirroring her behavior. You are going to have to really find the confidence within yourself that you had when you first started there. Because as I'm reading this, I know that your confidence has taken a bit of a battering just because you feel undermined. And I think whenever you're undermined in a job, what it does is it really shakes the core of any sleeping insecurities. And I think that rather than allow your manager and this new hire to play on your insecurities, you're going to really have to kind of pull the strength from inside of you, especially if you know you want to stay here. So the first thing I'm going to do is you need to now start being the loudest cheerleader of your achievements. That's the first. Secondly, I would suggest that you ask for a review of your objectives. And if you don't have any objectives, then you ask for a meeting to discuss what your objectives are. And you will frame it in such a way that you will email your boss and say, hi, I've been at the company now, for example, for 4 years, and I really love my role here. I loved, especially at the start of my role, where a lot of my duties included, and list them in bullet points, leave them like 4 bullet points, and then to put etc. Don't go into like loads and loads of responsibilities, but the ones that are quite important to you that you don't have anymore, I would highlight them. In regards to progression and development, it would be really important if you and I can sit down and discuss some objectives that I should achieve over the next 12 months. And I would really appreciate some guidance from you on how those objectives can be achieved. I look forward to having a meeting with you to discuss my objectives and my development. Now, I've always said that your development doesn't rest on your manager. You have to go out there and get the development you want. But the reason why I suggest that you have objectives is that you have something on record and you have something to work towards. And then that, to me, would be the first thing that you would do. And then when you're on projects, you need to start, like I've worked on projects before, you need to give regular updates to your manager, even if it's every month or every week. Give updates, like a small summary updates. And in those summary updates, write the achievements of the team, including your achievements. You need to own that process. That's what you need to do. You need to literally own, you almost have to bulldoze your way through to own that process. This girl that's come in is really smart. She's come into your organization and seen that actually she's sitting in between you and your manager, and she's trying to be seen. And you can't knock a girl for trying to be seen. But her trying to be seen is literally highlighting the fact that, do we really need you? That's what she's doing. You have to fight for your job, but you have to do it in the most professional way possible. The first question I would ask myself is, do you actually want to fight for your job? Before all this advice I'm giving you, do you want to fight for your job? If you want to fight for your job, then you need to start engaging in the process, in the advice that I'm giving you. And I will always say to you, remain professional. The thing is, it's difficult, especially when you see people who look like you. You automatically assume they're on your side. The only side is your side. You're on your own side. No one owes you anything. You owe yourself the opportunity to do a job that you enjoy to the best of your ability. And if somebody's preventing you from doing it, you have to strategically find a way to manage that situation. Earlier on in the dilemma, you were saying that your job changed a little bit and you had to like train staff and you didn't really like it. As part of a management role, training staff is like 101. And in fact, there's a lot of qualities that you develop by being able to train other people. Not only can you put in your CV, but it shows your ability to pass on knowledge, develop other people, and manage. When you're managing a team, sometimes the ability to develop junior members of staff is adding to your own development, i.e. cultivating and nurturing junior members of staff to go from junior to senior. That is an achievement. And I think, with any job, you're never going to do everything that you love as part of that job all the time. Sometimes it's the mundane tasks. So for me, one of the mundane tasks that I can't stand is my own admin. I can't stand it. But that comes as part and parcel of the job. So I'm hoping that my advice has helped you. And I've given you a bit of advice. And it would be interesting to know what your position is, because I can advise you on how to kind of go about this, but you have to commit to wanting to do this. And from your tone, I'm just getting the impression that you're just a bit fed up. And I don't know if you're fed up because you're frustrated or you're fed up because you're no longer interested in the job. So I'm hoping that helps you out. But more importantly, fighting for your job doesn't require an argument. It doesn't require an exchange of words. What it requires you to do is observe the lay of the land and understand that to be successful in this particular role, you're going to have to be strategic. And part of that strategy has to be taking back ownership of a role that belongs to you. Owning it, making it your own. You're not always going to get the caps and celebrations from people, but what you are going to make sure that you do is you've got some very clear objectives and you work towards achieving those objectives, understanding that there is a person that sits in between you and your manager, and what you have to do is almost manage her, and it's the way you go about it. And you have to find the confidence to be able to manage this situation, because I promise if you do, you will flourish, and wherever you go next time, you will learn the lessons in this role and be even better than you are now. So I'm hoping that's helped you. I wish you all the luck in the world. And more importantly, I want to say congratulations for navigating work and finding yourself in a position whereby you didn't think you would be in. And I appreciate you kind of, thanking me for my guidance, but ultimately you've gone out there and got something for yourself. Now you just have to keep hold of it. So that is the end of our dilemmas for today. I have a few more, but we will leave them for later episodes. I honestly cannot believe that we are literally in the middle of September. This year has just been unbelievable, to be quite honest, is the only way I can describe it. And I'm so excited for 2021. So my birthday is October 6th actually, I'm a Libran. And me and my friend have decided that because 2020 is cancelled, we are staying the same age in October. Yeah, you heard me right. Yeah, that's what I said. So I'm not aging, I'm staying the same age, and we're doing a rerun for next year, 2021. That's what we're doing. But listen, I don't know if you have been on my Snapchat or my Instagram. I'm hoping that you have, because I do give out the handles on the episodes. But I have something that I do once a month called Vagina Chronicles. Yes, Vagina Chronicles. And it's basically giving women advice about their personal hygiene and looking after their vaginas and their overall hygiene. And I'm just finding that there's a lot of women who don't know how to self-care in that way. And it's not something that I am judging anybody. I don't think anybody should be judged for it, because I think that people are not actually taught the importance of hygiene, especially vaginal hygiene. People are just not taught it. And if I'm being honest, all I was taught was to keep my vagina clean, not the reasons why. I wasn't even really told how to. And this is why, especially from the age of 12, it's when I started my period, I was having thrush weekly because I was using soap to wash my vagina. I wasn't actually guided on actual vaginal care, and also understanding that my vagina is quite different, understanding my pH balance, understanding the smell and what it was that I was trying to clean, understanding what my vagina smells like and what then I would have to put in place to make sure that, number one, I'm not getting reoccurring thrush, number two, that my pH levels are balanced, and number three, that actually taking the time to understand your vagina and your personal hygiene is what will keep you clean. So I go into a lot of detail about products I use. I talk about, a lot of things that people have also raised to me about personal hygiene and vagina care. So that will be done once a month on Snapchat. So if you don't follow me on Snapchat, go ahead and follow me on there. It's Toya Washington, all one word. Toya Washington, all one word, on Snapchat. And then I will be posting up some of the highlights of, the talk on Snapchat, on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Toya_Washington. Vagina Chronicles is just completely different. It is basically trying to assist and aid women on vaginal care and personal hygiene. And I'm really, really, really enjoying it because I'm using a bit of my humor, my personality, because I think it's such an awkward topic to talk about. And I don't think it always has to be all the way awkward. And I think we need to kind of remove the veil of awkwardness and really have full and frank conversation. People have already stopped washing their hands. Yeah, because people think that coronavirus has just disappeared, or it's just decided that it's going to take a holiday for the next month. And I feel like when you have to literally tell people how long they have to wash their hands for, there is a greater issue at play. People genuinely don't understand how to take care of their personal hygiene. People, all these natural products, all of this stuff, like, we're going to talk about all of it. And it's another side of me that I kind of haven't really explored, talking about vaginas and stuff. Like, I don't really talk about stuff like that. I would often call myself a bit of a prude. So I'm really enjoying kind of the conversation. And the next Vagina Chronicles is the 11th of October, 8 p.m. on Snapchat. So I am really looking forward to it. And I would encourage anybody, it doesn't matter where you're from, your background, if you want advice on personal hygiene and vagina care, then you listen to Vagina Chronicles, 11th of October, 8 p.m. on Snapchat, Toya Washington, all one word. So before I wrap up this episode, I want to touch on something. So Jo Malone, we know the brand Jo Malone. It's so expensive, that brand, but their candles are amazing. So John Boyega, who is a black male actor, he's been in Star Wars. He's just an all-round fantastic actor. And he really, really does represent black culture so, so well. And basically, he did a perfume ad, so a campaign for Jo Malone. So if you haven't seen it, I'm sure if you Google it, you'll be able to see it. Now, when they went to, I believe it's China, but correct me if I'm wrong, but they went to China, and instead of using the same advert starring John Boyega, where John Boyega is basically sharing a bit of his life story as part of kind of the ad, instead of using John Boyega, they decided to use a Chinese actor, an Asian actor, not John Boyega. And then they got called out. And then Jo Malone, they released a statement saying that the cutting of John Boyega from the ad was a misstep. It's not a misstep. It's just fucking racist. Let's just fucking call it what it is. It's fucking racist. What Jo Malone is doing is classic 101 of what most brands do, where they literally are just leveraging the trauma, black trauma, to sell. And where it doesn't fit their narrative in a certain country or region, they won't use it. I was reading some comments underneath a post about, Jo Malone and what they done, and somebody wrote, "This isn't a mistake. Our outrage has become a marketing ploy." And that's. Do you know what? I'm sick and tired of brands not being held accountable, and they just apologize and they bypass it as a misstep. But how many missteps are brands going to inflict on black culture before the people like you and me who inhibit the black culture, who live the black culture, who are the black culture, put our foot down and say, no more. We are not spending here. Why is it that we don't believe in the power of our own pound and the power and the spending power of our pound? i.e., if you will remove your money from a certain brand, they will feel the pinch. And it may be a pinch, but it's enough to cause brands to understand that we will be respected. And one thing I don't see too frequently is these missteps happening with other cultures. It is always with Black culture. And I've just literally become tired. I've become tired with brands normalizing their abuse of Black culture and then releasing a statement apologizing, as if an apology basically excuses their deliberate attempt at disrespecting a culture and a community that I belong to. So hear it now, hear it well. I will not be, under any circumstances, be spending any money with Jo Malone. No perfumes, no body spritz, no candles, nothing. No Jo Malone products will be bought with my money. No Jo Malone products will be in my home. Because I am sick and tired of brands like Jo Malone deliberately disrespecting our community, our culture, and trying to normalize the disrespect and only utilizing it when it benefits them financially. What happened with Joan Boyega's advert wasn't a misstep. It was a deliberate attempt to sell. That's all it was. And they knew that if they used a Black man in the advert in China, they wouldn't sell as much as they would if they used a Chinese man. Now, my thing would always be, if you want to use a Chinese man, use a Chinese man. Don't use the Black man when you now know, actually, I can get some money out. We're tired of being used. How long is the white man going to continue to use us? You used us as slaves. You used us to build your British Empire. You used us to pillage, steal, so that you can take all our artifacts and put it and showcase it in a glass in a museum for us as Black people to pay and look at and be reminded of what you have taken from us. There has to come a time where we say no as Black people. But I know that this will be just one in many missteps of many brands, but we'll still buy from them because we do not truly believe in ourselves as a community. Because if we did, these people would be absolutely terrified. Do you think that brands could ever disrespect the LGBTQ community? No, they wouldn't dare. The LGBTQ community have really, and I don't know how, but they've managed to really build a community whereby brands would be absolutely terrified to, quote unquote, as Jo Malone said, misstep with that community. So my thing is, why can't you afford that same respect with all communities? But I really think that the Black community can learn from other communities about how to almost make these brands and make these people realize and be almost terrified of actually disrespecting us and thinking there's no consequences. But I'm going to leave that there because I'm very passionate about it, because I'm just so annoyed. And I mean, you have the performative Black squares, you have all this performance and all of this bravado, but in reality, all we are as Black people to these brands are just opportunity. They don't even value us enough to, I almost put it to you, they don't even value us enough that when they're having these marketing discussions, I can almost guarantee you there's probably maybe a token Black person in the team, but that token Black person is not in the rooms that they need to be in to affect change or to make suggestions in discussions to do with the Black community. There's not even a representation of somebody Black from the Black community in those brands, because when they were making that marketing decision, I'd be very shocked to know if there was a Black person in that room. It would shock me if there was. And a lot of these brands, to be fair, they don't really market to the Black community. They don't. They market, for me, Jo Malone was always a white brand. It was for white people who could afford it. And then when I grew up and realised I could afford it, it wasn't marketed towards people like me. So now they've decided to market to people who look like me. I would just think that they'd be consistent across the board. Because if a black man is good enough for a marketing campaign in the UK, he's also good enough for a marketing campaign in China. But in changing the narrative, they become complicit in their racism and unconscious bias. Period. Anyway, guys, I'm going to leave it there. This is a dilemma episode, so I hope you've enjoyed the dilemma episode. Next week, as you know, we have a new episode of the Toy Talks podcast. As it currently stands, the podcast launched 1st of January 2020, and we are about to celebrate almost 30,000 downloads, and I think that is amazing for less than a year of a live podcast. I want to thank each and every one of you for always supporting the brand. Whenever there is a tweet or an Instagram post about a podcast, one of you, all of you, some of you are always atting the Toy Talks podcast and always introducing people to the platform. And I really appreciate it, because without you guys, I wouldn't be doing this every week. I would not be doing this. You guys make it possible for me to do this, because you interact with the brand and the platform, but more importantly, you interact with the podcast and you share it and you let people know it exists. And for that, I am truly, truly grateful. Anyway, guys, I'm going to leave it there. I'm wishing you a great week, a great month. We will reconvene next week, Tuesday, for another episode of the Toy Talks podcast. If you want to reach me on social media, my Twitter handle is Toya_W. Instagram is Toya_Washington or Toya_Talks. The website is toyatalks.com. The dilemma email address is hello@toyatalks.com. My name is Toya Washington, and you have been listening to the Toy Talks podcast.